India time, on South Asia time. So welcome to ninth TAFSSA webinar. So today we are doing the third round of our ongoing series of webinars on historical evolution of the agri-food systems in South Asia, where we take a historical lens to understand what are the path dependencies in the problems that we currently see in the agri-food systems. Where do the current inequalities come from? What are these barriers in overcoming some of these, and what history can teach us about how we ended up where we are, and therefore if it can give us any indication of where we can go and what are the different ways in which we can take policy forward. So today we will be having our webinar on the region of Odisha in India, and Dr. Anindita Sarkar, who is going to present today. A quick introduction to her is that she's a professor at the Department of Geography at Miranda House, University of Delhi, where she has been teaching since 2005, and at present she is also joined as a senior researcher at the Center for Development Research, ZEF, University of Bonn in Germany. Her research is anchored at the intersection of development and environment, and her work shows how technologies and policies of resource use, access, shape spaces. She has been associated with NCERT, ICSSR, IGNOU, World Bank, IWMI and ACIAR in various capacities, and was conferred with the UGC Research Award recently. I will hand it over to Dr. Anindita to take today's webinar forward. Just a quick brief. Anybody with any questions, please put it in the Q&A on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You can also put it in the chat. Majavina and I will keep an eye out on it. All right, over to you, Dr. Anindita. You are on mute. Yeah, we can see your screen.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Just a second.
Yeah. Perfect.
So, good morning from Bonn, and good evening, whoever is in South Asia. So, since Shreya has already introduced me and my topic, I would directly go into the content of it. And so first, let me introduce Odisha. Some of you may be already aware of it, but I thought a brief note will be good. So Odisha is you can look at the map, it's a coastal state in eastern India. So it has coastal districts and hilly districts. So it has diverse kind of geographical regions. And this is very important because the geography of Odisha is also defines the history of Odisha. And together with history and geography, we will see how the agri-food systems have changed and what kind of administrative policy decisions and natural resource endowments, climatic factors and disasters have led to a mixture of things that from the past till the present, it bears a kind of path dependency. So it will be like a story and that we will take, that will start from 1850 because our study is starting from 1850 until now, till today, what is happening. So Odisha has been in news not very much in the past because of starvation deaths. And there are districts like Koraput, Mayurbhanj and Balagir where there have been reported starvation deaths. And then we will see that how these starvation deaths were there in the colonial time. So as we all know that India was under the British rule, and I have just said that how history and geography are totally interlinked here. So here, as I said, that our study is beginning from 1850, and in 1858, Odisha comes under the direct control of the Queen, that is the British Crown, they call it, and it was tagged into the Bengal presidency. And 1912, then the province of Odisha and Bihar was carved out from Bengal presidency, and 1936, modern Odisha was formed. Only around 11 years before India became independent. So as I said, there are several agroclimatic zones because of its geographical location. Nevertheless, paddy is still the most dominant crop of the state. So as Shreya has already discussed that what is the research question that we are looking for in these historical evolution studies, we are looking at what are these political, economic and social developments in the regions that have taken us to this date. And throughout my study, I will be telling you how what has happened is still happening now, or it has some impression on it, so that our present context is better understood, giving example from the past and what we have learned and what we have not learned yet. So as I said about the history, and because it's our discussion today is on the historical evolution, this is a nice historical chart which shows us that how agricultural development, investments in agriculture and agroclimatic hazards have led to several policy decisions. First of all, I have marked these important things in red, and everything here is in detail, but I'll give examples of these 4 things. For example, there was this great flood in 1856, and this led to massive crop failure and starvation deaths, and there was a kind of farmers' unrest, and which became a citizen unrest because there was shortage of food, and it came to be, and the East India Company was largely blamed for this, saying that they could not manage the administration well, and hence there was this massive starvation. That's why suddenly there was this huge policy decision, and as we all know that there was a mutiny, and then it came under the British crown. So this was also quite related to food security issues. Then in 1866, there was famine. Now this famine is very interesting, and it is called the Great Orissa Famine. And 88% of total population in Orissa at that time died because of food shortages. So this is a very, very important year in the history of agrarian history of Orissa, because the famine was because of shortage of rainfall. And as we know, at that time, all the crops were rain-fed, and shortage of rainfall gave rise to less crops. And the famine preceded the next year, not the year when there was the drought, because they still had storage and people were fed. But unfortunately, what had happened, there was a flood just the next year, and it flooded all the rivers and canals. So the grain could not be transported from the surplus places where it was stored. So this led to a major problem. So there was 2 reasons why shortage of grains happened. Number 1, production, and number 2, distribution. So, well, it still happens these days also. Both of these things are important. And after that, what happens? A major thing happens in Orissa. That first time, Orissa sees the modern canal projects. That the British government feels that canals should be now built for 2 reasons. Number 1, to help to avoid flood, to control flood, and also for navigation, so that people could go from one place to another and grain could be transported. But then, well, there is a long story after this. The British engineers did not know the hydrogeology of the Orissa plains, which had these coastal rivers. And what they had done in the canal planning, they had linked the canals with the rivers, and the rivers were the estuarian rivers. The canals were having saline water. So many land got completely degraded because these canals, instead of helping, had led to further crop loss. Then what happens in 1897, there is another famine, which was also a drought and a flood combined famine. The problem here is that by this time, British government had realized that in Eastern India, the canals were not giving enough profit as it was giving in the Western India. In the Sindh area, especially around Haryana, Punjab, and Western UP region, where there were canals, there was increase in food production, increase in crop production, and canal cess was recovered quite well, which was not happening in the entire Bengal presidency. One, because I said the faulty planning of the canals. Number two, they could not help in flood control, because the embankments will breach and there will be massive flood, and the land was salinized, crop failures continue to happen. So in a way, we can just see the canals did not help much in food production or flood control. But there was another interesting thing that had happened because of the canals. Because of the canals, that rice had, now the middleman would procure the rice and they were transporting huge amount of rice to Burma, and that rice was also going to West, especially in France and Italy. They were eating rice that was grown in Bengal presidency. So after the birth of modern Odisha, there were a lot of amendments. All these amendments were related to irrigation, famine management, flood control, and protecting the farmers who were burdened with a lot of credit. Now, the main story of the independence was that the entire blame was on the British land revenue system. The land revenue system was very disproportionate, and it extracted all the profit, and no money was left for investment in agriculture. That's why the agriculture was having very, very low productivity. That is the basic narrative here. So in this diagram, you can see there is a vicious cycle of low productivity, low investment in agriculture, and that was also because of disproportionate land revenue. So it went on and on and on. But there were many, many other subsidiary issues which also led to low productivity, which we must understand. First of all, I just discussed about the disproportionate canal tax. This was a real discrimination for the farmers in Odisha, because the canals were not helping them at all. On top of that, there were huge amount of penalties, which also led to confiscation of their land if they did not pay those taxes. So one, they had to pay the land tax. On top of that, they had to also pay a canal tax, which was also gave rise to a lot of corruption among the tax collectors. So canal irrigation was unsuccessful. So of course, because of the geological reason. The other problem was destruction of cottage industry. So what has happened during this time, all the cottage industries were destroyed, because now cloth was coming from the mill produced cloth was all getting imported from the colonies. So the traditional industries were destroyed, but all these people who became unemployed, they started crowding in the agriculture. That is why there was labor productivity was also low. So this is important, why labor productivity and food shortage and agricultural productivity is also linked. When many people were finding out jobs as agricultural laborers, consequently their wages would remain low, and the low wages persisted year after year, and daily laborers were the ones who were the worst sufferer of food shortages. Amartya Sen has written a great deal on the famines in Bengal presidency, where he actually establishes that food shortages and famine deaths did not follow, sometimes did not follow because of natural calamity, but because people did not have money to buy food. And this was one of the reasons. The other problem was that of the economic depression of 1930, where the production, even if it was high, there was a slump. So the rice that was being exported or that was being sold to the middleman was also a the price had fallen. So even in good years, there was not much profit. In bad years, there was total failure. On top of this, there was in Odisha especially had another problem of absentee landlordism. In Permanent Settlement Act, when it came, so many zamindars, the landlords, they sold their land because they could not pay tax to the British government. So they were hoarded and continuously bought by many affluent people who became absentee landlords. They would live in Kolkata and they would have huge tracts of land in Odisha, and they would just send middlemen to collect taxes and had no interest in investing in the land. And probably here the British government thought that because the tax is now fixed, the tax will not increase. So the zamindars or the landlords will have incentive to increase production and pay the fixed amount of tax, and the rest is their profit. But unfortunately, that never happened because these landlords were not aware of how agriculture is in these kinds of areas. They did not even know their tenants. So there was a complete apathy from both the landlords and as well as from the British government. And it seemed that too much was expected from land without any investment. And this also, the insights from British literature shows that British government and the travelers and the literature from the West, it says that all this backwardness was because of lack of enterprise of the farmers, caste exclusiveness, because everybody could not do all kinds of occupation, because in India there was class exclusivity and caste exclusivity. Then there were climatic factors, there were droughts and floods, which the administration was not responsible for. And in fact, they said that they were very benevolent because they have put everybody together, unified the state, brought about the agricultural infrastructure, that is the canals, that brought about the agricultural, other kinds of infrastructure in terms of port facilities, railway tracks, which help people to move and which help the goods to also move. But they could not, the farmers could not decide well to increase productivity. So it was very strange. And the Indian scholars point out that it was because of the apathy of the British rulers that Odisha remained poverty-stricken with agricultural distress and economic loss, was all because of land revenue system. So it seemed that because people who were actually the farmers did not have ownership rights, that's why they were not keen to invest in that land, and because they were just tenants. So it was thought that if land could be distributed among people who are cultivators, probably the agricultural distress will end and production will increase. Still then, there was no talk about improving land or investing in a technology. So it was just believed that just by merely distributing land, agricultural productivity would increase, which we know that it is not so. That's what is Green Revolution. Then here, I'll just skip through it, but you can look at this. There were several kind of legislations. As I said, the main focus was to distribute land among people who were farmers. That would end rural poverty, or that will increase agricultural production. That was the kind of narrative. But unfortunately, we all know, unlike West Bengal, Odisha did not have a successful successful abolition of Estate Act, and land reforms were not successful. One, because there was no strong farmers movement, and another problem was that Odisha is also a country which has two kinds of land. So there was this fertile tracts of land which was taken over by the British. They had done extensive land surveys to determine its fertility. All the owners were recorded, and that land came under the land revenue system. And British did not look into those land that was clan owned. Those are the forested tracts where, from the historical times, the tribal population lived. So those land was owned by, they were clan owned land. And British thought they did not want to create conflict with the chieftains, the tribal chieftains. But ideally, it seems that they did not know how to do cadastral survey of these areas because they were hilly and forested, not so fertile. Number one, they did not want to take so much effort into it. And number two, the problem was that when the land is not having individual ownership, from whom would they take the tax from? So those land from the British time, they were just left on its own. So automatically after independence, all those land came under state ownership. And after that, we all know that Odisha had series of movements of these tribal land rights, their right to do shifting cultivation. But there was always a conflict with the state that these land became area that came under reserved forest area, protected forest area. There were penalties where if the tribals would go into do shifting cultivation. So still today, there are no provisions to protect the sharecroppers, or there are record of concealed tenancy in Odisha continues. So as I said, secure tenurial status was important because that would help to strengthen the claim and do more investment, safeguard cash flow over time, facilitate liquidation of assets. But all these did not happen. Even today, this is a problem. Now, at present, there are two more issues. What are those? First, it is seen in Odisha through various studies at micro level that wherever there are irrigated villages or irrigated land, the landlords would like to shorten their lease, evict their tenants, and extract surplus. Like I said, that there are no such legal provision to protect tenants and sharecroppers. It still continues. So this is one very interesting thing that has come up in the literature. The other thing is that in non-irrigated areas, there was mortgaging of land, but the landlords would take cash in advance. So in a way, we can see even today, if ownership of land is not done in a proper way, and there's concealed tenancy, and the land ceiling act was not successful because people had transferred land into names of their family members, and the land actually remained, large landlords remained large landlords. So there was no actual transfer of land. So there is limited success in tenancy legislation in Odisha. And we can see that there are historical reasons behind this higher landlessness and poverty. And still today, in irrigated areas and in non-irrigated areas, there are different levels and different ways in which a landlord still could extract surplus from smallholders or the tenants. The other thing is that very interesting thing in the Food Security Atlas of Odisha, the authors have written that food security in Odisha is historical as well as geographical. It shows that the tribe, wherever in the pockets of underdevelopment, wherever the tribal population lives, the food insecurity is still there. And here also we can see this is because of the land use systems and land ownership system in tribal areas, which I just discussed, that even with successive acts like Odisha Forest Act, Wildlife Protection Act, there is increased control of land in name of protecting fauna, whereas tribal areas are not still getting that. The other interesting thing here I would like to mention, there are tribal villages in the interior forest land where actually there is a village, but because those areas are demarcated as the areas are protected forest area or reserve forest areas, those villages are not even getting the benefits of all the development programs that the government gives, like food aid programs and subsidy programs, because their villages are not marked as a village. Their villages are marked as a protected area. So the people living there are not entitled to those benefits that the government is giving. So there are several issues here that we can link to food security system. Food security of the people. Then why there is this tribal faced loss of land? Because of two reasons. And why is it so like this? Number one is that the lowlands and paddy lands, which eventually came under private ownership due to influx of non-tribals. This happened immediately after independence. And people could buy land, and those land are now under private ownership, non-tribal private ownership, and people do grow paddy. And the tribal people, they were pushed further into the forested area. And now they are also banned from doing shifting cultivation because of these notifications, because I said that they have now come under protected areas and shifting cultivation is banned. Now there are, as I said, the measures have been taken, that the backward development program, all kinds of measures are being taken to provide food to these backward areas. And lot of incentives are being given to the tribal people who would be willing to leave the cultivation on the steppes. It is very hard to understand whether what is good and what is bad, because we can see there are clearly two schools of thought on shifting cultivation. One school says that it is unethical, anti-environmental, anti-development, anti-social, primitive, because it is leading to environmental degradation and it's not the right way to use resources. The other one is, the other school believes that this is the traditional livelihood. They have collective tested knowledge on biodiversity protection, sustainable use and natural resources, and these people in their own small areas, in their local ways, context specific ways, they are able to adapt to climate change in much better way than in the mainstream agriculture that's happening. So there are many micro studies that have also come out that these indigenous tested knowledge, instead of discarding them, they can be used. However, what is most important here is that there are two major issues. One is population, productivity, and deforestation. Population is increasing, so food productivity has to also increase. So how that is to be done is a major problem here, and these debates continue. The development projects have also displaced a sizable number of tribal groups who were practicing shifting cultivation, and later on in my presentation, I will show you that a lot of productive land is going into non-agricultural uses, and barren land in Odisha is on a major rise because of these mining issues. And here also later on I'll tell you that how that is also related to low productivity issues in Odisha. So after independence till 1980s, 47 to 80, the story is that agricultural productivity still remained low, whereas all these land legislation was taking place. Still then, productivity continued to be low. Large areas are only under rice, that is also under subsistence agriculture. And even with the Hirakud Dam coming, there was some fertile land that went into cultivation but did not make much difference. So scholars feel that there is a delayed green revolution in Odisha. This revolution, they call this green revolution because suddenly in the early 1980s, there was a huge increase in agricultural growth in Odisha, which was higher than the national average. And this has been termed as the late green revolution of Odisha. This is a phenomena if entire eastern India, I can say that. It also happened in Odisha. But interestingly, in Odisha, the increase in input did not happen. So that's what, when there were not much increase in input, whether it is fertilizer, pesticide, insecticide, irrigation. So that growth plumped within 5 years, again came down below national average. After liberalization, another set of factors added in this. What happened? Two things. First of all, after liberalization, the input prices increased manifold. So cost of cultivation increased and profit levels went down. The other problem was that the restriction on export of common rice was lifted. So again, Odisha started seeing export of rice. And as I said, their rice is subsistence crop, and that's the main food crop of the people. That is again creating a problem in food security. The other thing is that the policies were very antithetical. Once they said that special food grain production program will be there, so grow food grain. The other says that grow high value crop and diversification. But there's no clear guideline as to where and who is going to do this. So these are jargons that come up and go, but in the real field, still it is the rice, which is the monocrop, and productivity below national average. Now, Odisha continues to have natural disasters like floods and droughts that I have mentioned in these years, and cyclones. So, as a consequence, two things have happened. Because there is no diversification, rice is the monocrop, and on top of that, investments, the agricultural investments are very low. Rice still remains dependent on weather fluctuations, because extent of irrigation is quite low in Odisha, and floods destroy crops and droughts also destroy crops. So rice has been having a total unstable yield throughout the period till now. So reforms have not been in favor of agricultural growth in Odisha. Rather than that, what has happened, because after the reforms, there has been mining has gone up to a large extent. So what has happened when mining goes up, land is becoming barren. Barren land is continuously on a rise. Interestingly, there is some investment in tertiary sector. So all the people, employment is going towards, some is going towards tertiary sector. Unfortunately, there is not much industrialization, so the secondary sector cannot absorb working population. So again, we see there is disguised employment in Odisha with low productivity. Same that was happening in British Odisha, as I just mentioned, because the cottage industry was developed, there was overcrowding in agriculture. After liberalization, the same thing is happening in Odisha in modern day. So post-liberalization, one good thing that has happened is that direct procurement of paddy from the farmers through this decentralized procurement of paddy. This has led to a major improvement in paddy procurement and hence food security, and also giving assured income to farmers. So that is why Odisha has been encouraging commercialization of agriculture. Especially, we all know that this millet mission has been launched in Odisha, which is very much encouraged. This is also the year of the millets, and they can grow with less amount of water and can also bring on table a more nutrient-rich diet. The other thing that has happened in the last 10 years is that major subsidy in making tube wells. Although they are giving a lot of subsidy for shallow tube wells and mini tube wells, unfortunately, electrification is very low in Odisha. Prices are high. Its unbundling of electricity has already happened. And because of high electricity rate, farmers do groundwater irrigation with diesel. Again, cost is very high, so not much profitable. As I said, that Odisha has launched these small programs like the paddy procurement automation, PPAS they call it. This has won the state award that they say, but agriculture has become input intensive. Again, if we say input intensive, as not much as intensive as in Punjab and Haryana, comparatively input intensive. And there are a lot of schemes and efforts to shift to diversify crops, but that does not see through empirical records. Now, Odisha receives copious amount of rainfall. So why is irrigation necessary? Which I have already answered, that irrigation is important because there are successive drought years where there is massive crop failure because they grow rice, and rice is a water intensive crop. So either they shift towards maize, or they must have proper development of irrigation. And because there is a lot of moisture stress even in the Rabi season for a Rabi crop to grow. Now here I have given some data here that it says that private investment in Odisha has never happened. This is also very much because of historical path dependency, that I also mentioned that that there is less investment still now. Land ownership is an issue. Tenants would not invest in land as it has happened in West Bengal. And one of the major reasons is that the land rights have not been given to the Odisha farmers as it has happened in West Bengal. The other interesting thing, which is it really needs much more deeper research, is that public investment has gone down in the canal command areas, and there are many non-functioning groundwater structures, and instead of having high irrigation potential, that doesn't show up in the at the ground. Now, groundwater irrigation in agriculture, that I said that diesel operated because of irregular, unreliable electricity supply. However, studies have shown clear linkages between irrigation, agriculture, livelihood, and poverty. Nevertheless, there has not been enough investment in irrigation. Then we have to have more secondary data to understand why there is high investment in irrigation is not resulting in growth in irrigation potential in Odisha. Whether it is due to lack of physical availability of water or there are institutional barriers, it is hard to understand. There enough research needs to be done on this. Then electricity and agriculture. This is very important, as Odisha is coming up with a lot of plans for commercializing, making agriculture more commercial, but that needs electricity for cold storage, transportation, and also groundwater irrigation wherever it is possible. But there has been a lot of concerns that the coastal districts, if they have deep tube wells, there will be seawater intrusion, whereas because of hard rock topography, there are major well failures. So this also needs to see, the aquifer has to be studied as to where these investments will have to be made. Because recently, Odisha government has also joined hands to develop solar irrigation pumps. And if these investments come, where will those wells be will be a major area of research. So, and because there is a lot of subsidy that the state government is giving, without understanding where these wells will be located. There are no such studies on that. Then the studies also say that because of non-availability of good quality and quantity of power is one of the major reasons of poor agricultural growth in Odisha. Then comes credit. Now I just discussed the historical reasons of farmers being in debt and because of low productivity. The same thing is happening still today. The two interesting things that has come up from the secondary literature is that after 1991, after the liberalization, it shows that there are agricultural loans have been declared more as a non-performing assets, and less number of formal credits are flowing in agricultural sector in Odisha. That is why the farmers are mostly depending on informal sources, and informal money lenders take lot of interest rates are very high, and they are mostly tenants take these kind of informal loans, because the formal agricultural loans are given on assets. So if you don't own land, you are not able to take agricultural credit. This is also problem in the tribal areas where there are clan ownership still there. In some pockets, they are not able to take any loans because formal credits are not given to people who do not own land. So this is a big problem, and it's also seen that there is a caste difference also here, that buying and selling also happen in between the castes. Like that means the high caste people sell and buy land among themselves, not to the low caste. The other thing is that it's very interesting to see that mostly the small landholders and tenants, they take loan for consumption, not for investments in land, whereas the large landholders, they do take credit to invest on land. But later on, I'll give you other examples and statistics to show that Odisha is one state in India where investment in land improvement investments in Odisha has been very, very low. And the credit situation.
2 more minutes, maybe 5.
Oh yeah. I'll just go very quickly. I think I have very less time, so I will just keep through these. So climate change and climate variability are the other two things, and how it impacts agri-food systems. These food security issues I have already discussed, and here there are dietary changes. The dietary habits are also changing in people. It shows that the rich people are now moving towards non-rice grains, whereas poor still in that, mostly because the rice is subsistence crop and whatever they grow, they eat. So these are the current drivers of low productivity and stagnation. And as I have said, that the drivers still remain the same. The crop diversification has not happened. Lack of investment in land is still there. Climatic factors, of course, they are not, that will remain there, but due to climate changes, research and studies have shown the extreme events, the intensity and frequency has both increased. And still, there are institutional and technological factors which has kept agricultural productivity in Odisha very, very low. Now here, the current drivers, if I just summarize in 2 minutes, as Shreya has given me only 2 minutes, I would like to say that 3 things that are same that was there from historical time. So first, as I talked about agriculture, overcrowding in agriculture. In Odisha, there has not been much absorption of working population in secondary sector. Tertiary sector, a little bit of increase. So the whole lot of people are crowded in agriculture with low productivity, and wage rates are still very low. And I have told you that when wage rates are very low, it also impacts food security, standard of living, investment. It goes on as a vicious cycle, and climatic events and floods and droughts exhibits on that. Then comes low investment. Still now there is low investment in agriculture. There has not been much private investment in agriculture like it has happened in the say agriculturally in intensive agricultural areas. Even in Bangladesh, we have seen there has been irrigation boom because of private investment. It's not so in Odisha. Probably because one of the reason is that they have less savings. Diversification has not happened in paddy. It's still dependent on rainfall and much to the shocks. So these are the 2 things, that 2 paragraphs that I have taken. One, literature pre-independence and one from literature post-independence. And interestingly, it says that in Odisha, the rich peasants hardly invest 2% of their surplus in agriculture. So still the same thing has happened. The narrative is now changed. Now I just talk about the narrative and end. In the pre-British time, the narrative of low productivity was because of lack of enterprising farmers, caste exclusiveness, and climate disasters. Now in the present age, it will be completely politically incorrect to say that our farmers lack enterprise. They don't have money to invest. So that's why you cannot say they're not enterprising. Caste inclusiveness also cannot say. So the narrative has now come down to climate disasters. Odisha is food insecure because there are a lot of cyclones, droughts, and floods. So the narrative has to be on investments, policies to make farmers more enterprising, how to bring out more technological revolution that should not repeat the Green Revolution story probably. So it still remains very uncharted. Whereas same things keep on happening again and again like a cyclic way, as I said. Thank you very much. Shreya, have I skipped important points? I'll be very happy to take questions.
Questions? Yeah.
Yes.
I have a whole bunch of them in the chat, and we also have some questions here. So firstly, thank you very much for that. I love the narrative that we ended with, how we seem to be shifting from an institutional narrative of the problem to a more and more naturalized narrative of the problem, which I think has a lot of bearing on what our policy focus currently becomes, and why so much is not changing. Okay, so Ajishman, I see a question from you. I think we can, Mahajubin, can we give him rights to the panel so that he can actually ask the question himself?
Sorry, sure. Yeah.
Can you give Ajishman right to the panel? Maybe he could just ask the question himself.
Sure.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Ajishman.
Yes.
Audible.
Yes, Ajishman.
Hello.
Yeah, Ajishman, go ahead with your question.
Yeah. Hi, Anindita. Thanks. I had two sort of clarification question. One was around, was there any experience or why not public investment in sort of big tubewells that can be used for groundwater irrigation has not developed? And the second question was, you mentioned that this rice monocropping. I just wanted to understand, like in many cases, farmers do choose rice as a least risky crop sometimes. So I just wanted to understand, has the rice monocropping in terms of risk, has it increased their risk or has it reduced their risk? Like, just if you can say a few words on that.
Yeah. So first of all, with the rice, that's a very quick answer. They grow rice because they have very small land, and rice is whatever rice they grow, they consume. So it's completely subsistence. So if you talk about the risk, they grow rice to consume, not because it's a low risk crop. The other thing is that the risk has increased because there is less irrigation and drought years. There is failure of rice because rice requires water. And even if they want to sell it, it's not much profitable because inputs prices have gone up. So in that way, they don't have marketable surplus. So it remains subsistence. I mean, just for consumption. And it has become risky over the time. Then about why has government not invested in deep tube wells? This is very, very interesting. Government has not invested in deep tube wells. Remember, I had just talked about this thing that suddenly there was a growth in food grain production during that time. But there is no investment in deep tube wells or in Odisha as such. Then when the liberalization picks up, the government's effort is on mining. That becomes most profitable there. And I see only in the last 20 years, there are some very targeted policy for agricultural development.
Thanks.
And another interesting thing is that Odisha was one of the first states that went for unbundling of electricity, 1999. And there, historically, Odisha did not have a peasant movement. So till today, they do not have representation in the policy making, and nobody is able to bargain for those policies which are very specific for agricultural investment improvement, probably, which is there in Gujarat, which is there in Punjab. Even the left government, the way the land reforms happened in West Bengal, everything was absent in Odisha.
Okay. No, thanks a lot. What is interesting is that as far as I know, even now government is investing a lot, like canal relining, then OPICRA also. These are all still surface water canal-based systems. So it is interesting, or I am not aware. Maybe they are investing in deep tubules groundwater. But yeah, thanks.
No, because that's what I told in the presentation. You have not observed. I said that they will be investing a lot on the solar pumps, because that's a central government scheme, but they don't know where to put these wells, because Odisha has hard rock topography where there is massive well failure. So a common farmer, suppose the neighbors dig wells and that fail, so they will not invest in that, right?
Yeah.
So it is to the policy makers to actually see which are those areas where you can get dig the well.
Thanks a lot.
If there any other questions, just please raise your hand and Mahajabeen will let you ask the question, or you can put it in the chat. I just had a few questions, Anindita.
Yes.
I think if we, so there are some interesting patterns in Odisha. Firstly, I think the path dependency is extremely strong, considering that right from historical times where tenancy essentially stopped or disincentivized farmers from investing in inputs, we see that even after this so-called delayed green revolution, it came in with probably, I don't even know why they termed it as green revolution, because investments in inputs still did not happen. So they probably shifted crops, varieties or something, but it did not come with the rather practices and technology package that green revolution comes with. And I think groundwater is also a part of that problem, the fact that there has been no investment in groundwater. Do you think that a comparison with, because we are looking at the Bengal presidency, a comparison with what happened in West Bengal and in terms of geography, say close to, say in Andhra, for instance, or Telangana, do you think a comparative understanding of these sort of neighboring states and what happened to policy there after independence versus what changed or did not change in Odisha can give us some indications towards why there has been such a massive lock-in in Odisha, which we don't see in a lot of the other states? I mean, I'm sure they have their own issues, but this kind of complete block in agricultural development and green revolution is almost unique to this region, because all the surrounding states have moved in different ways to more modernization in agriculture.
Yes, thanks, Shreya. Even if this point came to my mind, I'll answer this question in two parts. When you said that it's very interesting to see suddenly why there is this agricultural growth much in the early 1980s, right? So I did dig out a lot of literature because I was doing a comparative study of West Bengal and Bangladesh, and Punjab is my area of work. Though much secondary work needs to be done, but to my mind, what has happened, that green revolution in Western India, which began in the mid-60s, they had started showing plummeting yield by early 80s, right? And here they started increasing the yield. Now it says that their yield was higher than the national average. That's how they are saying that probably a kind of green revolution has happened. Some scholars say there's a green revolution to be there, if you can say it was. And some say that it seems green revolution has surpassed Odisha. Okay, so it's just an interplay of statistical number, which we should really check. The second thing, important thing that I would, because in West Bengal, for example, there are studies which clearly say that the green revolution in early 80s is because of land reforms, because the government invested in these packages, the seed packages. So there are studies which really say that these are the determining factors for that growth. But Odisha, there is nothing. Then you talk about the neighboring states and why did happen in the neighboring states, not in Odisha. To my mind, Odisha government was too engrossed in mining, did not give so much focus on improving agriculture. Because the studies also show that, all these issues on tribal land rights, why it is so much? Because clearly they were those areas where the mining had to be done, and hence they had to be evacuated, right? The forest kept like that. I mean, it does not show any targeted way of launching those package technologies, which we call as green revolution, seed, fertilizer, and irrigation. So now they have the millet mission at present, which is going on. So millet is also, that can be a good crop for Odisha because it can grow with less rain. And if you see, interestingly, who was growing the millet? The tribals were actually growing millets. And a variety, the tribal population do not have monocrop. They have variety of crops they grow. And because to avoid risk, like Archishman's question was, he said that they grow rice to avoid risk, which is the other way around actually.
Right.
And I mean, it's hard to say from this secondary analysis, but it seems they do want to go back to their traditional crop and maybe change dietary habits, because studies also showing that they have started consuming more wheat than rice for whatever reason. And now even, in their programs like these Food for Work and these integrated child development programs, they are giving millet. They're trying to bring that in the culture, in the diet, so that people consume millet.
Right. So I think Odisha has really revealed quite a few research gaps, which I think are very interesting ways to pick up. We have just 1 minute to close. I will take one last minute for one question. It was from an anonymous attendee, so I am not able to hand it over. It says, thanks for the very informative presentation. What is the status of agricultural mechanization, including irrigation, during pre and post liberation? I'm assuming that's liberalization stages.
Yeah. Actually, I did have that in my presentation, was so long, probably I didn't say. Agricultural mechanization is very, very low in Odisha. And that's why there is feminization of agriculture in Odisha is high. That's also very interesting because they don't have machines. Why they don't have machine is also, I said, because there is overcrowding in agriculture. Wage rates are very low. And women are doing these transplanting and weeding is almost 100% done by the women. I mean, transplanting and weeding in rice. Low wage, they don't mechanize. I think Punjab went for massive mechanization because of very, very high wage rates. And Punjabis are not traditional rice growers. No Punjabi stand on hot water transplanting rice seedling. All done by laborers coming from Bihar and Eastern UP. And they go for massive mechanization because their wage rates are very, very high. I mean, it's also cyclic.
No, that's fascinating. I think, thank you. I mean, it was a great presentation because I think it really brought in the natural, the cultural, the economic, the institutional, and how narratives are changing and how that is affecting policy. I think it really opens up a lot of new questions. I think more than necessarily answering any of our, complete questions completely, it really opens up new questions. And I hope that that has triggered off a lot of interesting research questions for everyone listening in. So thank you very much. We are on our closing time, so I will have to cut this short, but the report, the first draft report or the summary report of the study is already there online. And you can find it by the name of Historical Evolution of Agri-Food Systems in Odisha, in India. And that's a part of the TAFSSA outputs that we had last year. And we will have more papers, hopefully, from the massive report that we have. And we hope to see some papers come out probably next year and have more interesting questions to develop. So thank you very much. Thank you, ma'am, and thank you everyone for joining in. Logging off now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.